Good evening, everybody. Today is March 6th. It's a meeting of the school building committee, and later on will be the permanent building committee. Want to call the meeting to order. One thing that I do want to mention up front is there was we saw some questions and emails earlier from some citizens. There was some work going on at the school, and one of the subcontractors that was doing the work should have gone and notified people that they would be accessing their backyards. It was surveying to determine the property lines. It was an oversight on their company's part to do that. We acknowledge that we probably should have done a better job at notifying people. We'll take that as a lesson learned, and we will do a better job in the future. But we just want to notify everybody that we are aware of that, and thank you for letting us know. That was going on. And then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Quinlan from Vertex.
Thanks, Rich. I would also add just on that note that it's likely that the site work that was ongoing today should be complete, and that we don't anticipate more work for that operation, but we certainly will make sure we have proper notification if for some reason we need further work along the property line so that neighbors are aware. So apologies from the team for the miscommunication, and as Rich noted, we'll do better moving forward. So first on our agenda was just to kind of do a quick recap of the visioning and community meetings that have occurred since we last met. We have done some educational visioning sessions, and also we had a community forum last week. I don't see Bob here, so I was hoping he could make maybe Mark, do you want to, or Anna, do you want to recap our visioning sessions, and then I can recap the community forum?
Sure. Anna, I can jump in. You can jump in afterwards if you'd like to, but I think, we had a great turnout for the first visioning this session that we had with David Stephen. I think we had probably around 35 people or so, I think, that came to the middle high school library a couple of weeks ago. Really had the chance to kind of kick the project off with that group and hear from them as to what some of the top priorities that they had. The mix of people was anyone from students to teachers and staff, to community members, to parents, administrators. So, it was and again, like Charlie and Mike and Jeff were there as well. And I thought overall the discussion and dialogue that we had amongst the group was great. It was nice to see so many people from the community that were interested in being a part of the process and speaking so thoughtfully about what their aspirations were for the building. I thought that was really interesting, and certainly the feeling, I think, of the people that were there for the community, the interests varied on what things that they were looking for. I think the big thing, we talked about some of the priorities for our district and what we thought were really important, and continuing to be able to personalize learning, build community like we do in our buildings, differentiated instruct, and being able to have, at the middle school, our teams stay together, at the high school, our departments be able to located near each other, and some of those types of things. So it was our hopes and dreams for the district. We talked a little bit about tying that into our vision of a graduate, which, lends itself into 4 different areas. You've got communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and character. And those all segue nicely into the things that we were talking about of what would look great in a 21st century building. So I think, you heard anything from discussion around living walls to thinking about what we want for fields were brought up at one point. The instruction that we'd have in our classrooms, the ability to students to collaborate, the ability for the town to be able to use the space in ways that, people talked about the seniors maybe having some space and then them being able to use some of the space in the building or outside the building if it was related to fields and whatnot. The community at large, whether it be all the different organizations and group that we have come in, from Millis Theater Group to the Girl Scouts and, et cetera, to athletic use in our facilities, which obviously in town, we have a lot of different teams that come in from Metro West basketball and beyond that use the facilities on a regular basis. So, it was a wide variety of interests. There was a lot of discussion. And I think we have our next visioning meeting tomorrow night. And we'll have some continued dialogue and discussion about, what the priorities are. But I think overall, having that many people in our first meeting was pretty impressive. And I think a lot of great information was shared between everyone in the room. And I don't know if I took care of everything, but certainly feel free to jump on board.
Yeah, you did a great job. Yeah, I think the purpose of the first session was really just to set the priorities of, what does everybody really care about educationally? And I think we'll keep moving the needle towards what does that mean for a building through the next two sessions. So we have a session tomorrow night, 6 to 8:15 via Zoom. It's a virtual meeting, and then we'll have another one, I believe, on the 21st. Does that sound right? Yeah. Thank you.
Great job, guys. And then last Wednesday, we had a community forum that was well attended. We walked through timeline, schedule, process, a lot of stuff, some of which we haven't reviewed with this group. So I'm going to present some of that tonight. And then we're going to jump into some of the design options from TAP-A. Next on the agenda, we did have just a brief update on existing conditions exploration. Charlie, do you want to recap our existing conditions work?
Sure. Well, we've already heard about one of them, which was the site survey. So the work is not construction work, or it is nothing other than survey work, right? So they've been out there for a couple of weeks, and it was true that today is probably their last day. And they were really just trying to wrap up work along the access road in terms of getting a full site survey of the entire site. And that was one of the four disciplines that we had talked about getting out into the field to do, basically just kind of verification. One is traffic. Their traffic counts, and we'll be developing, for the purposes of this coming submission, a existing conditions report. So you're not going to have any proposed conditions. It'll just be, this is what we already saw, this is the condition of the existing traffic. And then after that, we will get a proposed Geotech was out during the break, the holiday, the winter break,
Yeah.
and they took a series of test borings. They are done. Oh, they're done, and they will be after they'll test the soil, check the boring logs, and develop an existing conditions geotechnical report that'll tell us what the soils are like. And then finally, there is basically what's called ACM, which is asbestos containing material survey that has happened at the high school, and John said that wrapped up today. And that included both air testing and material. What's really critical about that is that they will give us a cost estimate, which is a pretty usually with any kind of building that's been around for a while, quite a significant cost burden to a project. And we would like to know that early. So we'll know what the abatement costs are. They go into the demolition costs as part of the cost estimate. It's a really good, helpful thing to understand. So those are the four things, and they're all well underway. And then, of course, our consultants have all been out, our engineering been out to the site to look at systems, et cetera.
Thanks, Charlie. So do you have the presentation ready to share? Because I think that's the next on our agenda, is to start to go through that presentation. So you're on mute, Charlie.
Sorry, not only am I on mute, I'm all right. So now I need to share with you.
Yeah.
I'm on my screen too. Okay, you see that?
Yep. All right.
Great.
Next slide.
So you see the cover sheet?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. That's you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it to turn. It's still seeing the cover sheet.
Oh, I'm sorry. There,
Yeah,
I got it.
It's better. Yeah, I think your connection's a little slow. You broke up a little at some point, so we'll try to get through this. So most people here are familiar with this. This we presented in the past, but we did present this at the community forum, just outlining the overall process. You know, we've sort of starred at the bottom there, the community forums that are planned for the future as well. Noting that we did have the one at the end of February. And so this was just presented to the town to take us through to a funding vote in the spring of next year. And then hopefully after a successful vote, start the next phase of the project in design development. So next slide. So once Charlie gets into some of the options that TAPE has developed, we're going to start talking about how we evaluate those options and how do we come to decisions. And so typically what we recommend is we do a matrix with the options where we take all of the options and evaluate them against certain criteria. This is just a representative list that can be added to, subtracted from, but these are the types of things that typically options are evaluated on. First and foremost usually is the educational program accommodation. So what this means is basically how does each option address the goals of the educational program, as some may be superior to others. Two is cost. That is also something that's going to be fresh on everybody's mind. And obviously each option will have varying costs. So that's always one of our evaluation criteria. Schedule. There's certainly advantages to new builds in terms of reduction in schedule, but that's something that we want to evaluate. It may or may not be as important to you as some of the other items. Disruption to the education during construction. This is basically, you know, evaluating, like, especially with an ad reno that we're considering that does have some disruption. So we want to make sure we're at least talking about all the pros and cons of each of those options. Sustainability, you know, whether it's a value to you, it's going to be a value to some people in your community. It's certainly a value to the MSBA. Having that discussion, there may be differences between the options in terms of sustainability goals. Construction impact to neighbors. You know, we've talked about neighbors already tonight, but we always want to be cognizant of what the impacts are to neighbors and making sure we're communicating with them and bringing them up to speed on that and minimizing it as well as we can, so that we're not impacting neighbors too negatively during the construction phase. Swing space is a term used for temporary facilities. Certainly with an ad reno project on the horizon, we're going to have to consider the size and costs of swing space, and which options are superior to others. So that's an evaluation criteria that we would usually expect to see on this type of project. Traffic, we talked about traffic, the traffic engineers, making sure we're, you know, minimizing any impacts, hopefully not making anything worse, hopefully improving actually. So traffic is another criteria that typically we will evaluate. Parking and on-site circulation, similar but different to the traffic. It's you certainly have some parking capacity issues already right now, so we certainly don't want to make any of that worse. Permitting and approvals complexity. So I know with the Clyde Brown School, those that were part of that, you know, remember the Article 97 process, and depending on the, you know, what options we're evaluating, it may change the permitting complexity. So we want to always be cognizant of those decisions. Future growth and flexibility is pretty straightforward. You know, should 20, 30 years from now, you need future expansion, we want to make sure we allow for that and not shoehorn you in. Public safety considerations. Obviously, public safety is a huge priority for school projects. We want to make sure that the public safety officers from the police department, fire department are all looped in, and that we avoid, you know, any hurdles in that arena. And then site complexities, whether it's wetlands, ledge or rock underground that would need blasting or excavation or mechanical excavation, access issues, anything that makes the site more complex. Sometimes that's used as a criteria to judge the different options, as some may be more restrictive than others. So this is just sort of a baseline, and I want you to start thinking about these things as you look at the options that Charlie's going to present. We're going to start building out our matrix. Certainly tonight, once we get through the presentation, if there's anything that you want to add to this or you don't think is really a concern for the town, then we can adjust accordingly. So next slide, please, Charlie. So this is what we presented last week. This is our standard evaluation matrix, where we end up listing sort of the options along the top. I know it's going to be impossible for you to read, but that's why I had that criteria slide before us. And then the criteria along the side. And then eventually we fill it out with text as it's showing here. We put in, pros and cons into each of the boxes of each option or any notes. And then we get a feel for how you feel about it, in terms of which options work the best, which options work the least for each of the criteria. And then we color code it with sort of a stoplight approach, which is really sort of a 1 to 5. And what this does is this gives you sort of a graphic representation, which makes it pretty easy to see which options are rising to the top, green being the best and red obviously being the most restrictive. And as we go through all of the criteria, you start to see which ones are going to really float to the top. So that should make it easy to just do. But these are things we're going to ask you to fill out and provide feedback on as we start to get through the options. And then eventually we're going to eliminate options and start to reduce down. And then in the next phase, in the PSR phase, is when we select one of those options as the preferred option. Next slide, Charlie. The other thing I presented on at the community forum that I just wanted to make sure this group was up to speed on was the MSBA process and reimbursement. We're going to get a lot of questions on this, and it's very convoluted. It's not simple. So we want to be as transparent and open about this as possible. The MSBA has cost caps. There are certain things that are ineligible. There's certain things that they're eligible up to a certain point, and then they hit a cap. So we want to make sure that that's clear to the community, that's clear to the SBC, that's clear to any constituent that has an interest in this project. So there are things that are categorically ineligible, like things that are not part of the core educational program, costs for items that are not part of the permanent building and grounds, and costs beyond the project scope. 2 is the caps, which I'll get into a little bit more. And then cost for spaces that exceed guidelines, and in parentheses sometimes. So the MSBA has a space template we've talked about briefly in the past that gives guidelines for what they expect from a typical classroom or a cafeteria, and anything over that needs to be approved by the MSBA staff if they're going to participate. And to prove it out, you need to justify that there's an educational benefit or some benefit operationally to the school to justify the added space. So there are plenty of times and plenty of examples of schools, that have pursued, sometimes it might be a larger gym than normal, or, an extra classroom, or things like that, that they will approve as long as it is in the best interest of the educational program. Next slide, please. So the categorically ineligible things are things like land acquisition, legal fees, offsite improvements, financing costs, the swing space and modular classrooms we talked about, building permits, asbestos floor tiles are ineligible because they assume that the town has already addressed them. district admin offices, which might be an issue here where we, since the district admin office is in the building. It's not to say that you can't do them, you can't be part of the project. It just means the MSBA won't participate in that cost associated with that. Next slide. And then the caps. So the soft costs, which are like design fees and the OPM fees and other consulting fees, are capped at 20% of the construction cost. Within that, there's a cap on the OPM cost of 3.5% of construction cost, and the architect at 10% of construction cost. So those things are capped out in terms of what the MSBA will participate in. And then the building costs, this was recently significantly updated in October. So that's good news for you. But it's now up to $550 a square foot for the max for a building cost per square foot. But I would note that, you know, schools these days are going at $700, sometimes $800 a square foot right now, depending on how the design works out. So there's definitely something that's you're going to get capped out. We're going to reach that cap. It's an almost certainty. Site cost is another one that can sometimes be easily hit, but those are usually on new build options. Doing an ad reno obviously will help to minimize the site costs. So, you know, hopefully we don't end up reaching a cap there. FF&E and technology, or furnishings and technology. The way I always describe this stuff is if you flip the building upside down and shook it, this is the stuff that falls out. And so it's not permanently sort of affixed to the building, but it's there to support the operation. This number has been capped for quite some time, and it's $2,400 per student. It's about $1,200 per student for furnishings and $1,200 for technology. And that's based off of the approved enrollment. And then lastly, on the caps, change orders exceeding 1% of construction costs. So they recognize that change orders are part of the process. There are ones that are design issues that just weren't fully designed or coordinated. There's ones that are unforeseen conditions. There's ones that might be owner changes where you decide you want to add something. So there's different ways, and we'll track all of that, but ultimately the MSBA's participation in that is capped out. Next slide.
Before you leave that, Mike.
Yep, go ahead, Jim.
Can you just sort of make a distinction with the reno cost? Is it $550 per square foot for renovation or new, or is it a different number?
It's construction costs. So whether that's a reno or so if you take the whole construction cost, regardless of the type, that's the cap.
Okay, thank you.
But it's important to say, when we're saying cap, it isn't a cap. It's a cap on funding. It's not the cap that you can spend more.
Correct.
Yeah, we're not going to get a school building.
That's the amount they will participate in.
Yeah, we're not going to get a building for $550 a square foot.
No, you're not.
No, and unfortunately, we used to be able to get furnishings and technology for $1,200 each for 24 total, and we can't even do that anymore with the increase in cost in furniture and technology. So MSBA historically does not keep up with costs, and you can see all the trend lines that show that, and they kind of admit it. They just say, "Hey, it's what we're going to do. It's not what it's going to cost you. It's just what we're going to participate in." But in a way, it shouldn't really be cap. It should be MSBA participation or something.
Yeah,
you know?
They did recognize that they had lagged pretty significantly given the recent inflationary pressures of the last couple of years, which is why their cost per square foot was $390, I believe, up until October. So adding $160 per square foot, that's a pretty significant jump. It doesn't get, all the way. The gap was still pretty large to what actual projects cost. But I will say that just as of October, there's a pretty significant jump in their participation. So that's a good thing.
Mike, one quick question. On change orders?
Yep.
Is that 1% of total change orders?
It's 1% of the construction costs. So if let's say it's a $50 million construction budget, 1% of that would be 500,000 in
So,
total.
but that's total cost of all change orders.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So the next topic, and you're going to get a lot of questions as a group as we start to, this project starts to be out in the community more, is reimbursement rate. So the MSBA evaluates all the towns and does all of their math, and they come up with reimbursement rates for each town based on wealth factor, et cetera. So Millis has a 53.53% reimbursement rate. Now that's the base rate. And oftentimes people will see that and then expect to say, okay, well, Millis is only on the hook for, 46.5%. But there are some things that make it more convoluted. So there are incentive points for energy efficient schools. And we won't go into too much detail because we do have to get to the design presentation tonight, but that's from either 0 to 3% and then another 1% bonus for certain things. Maintenance score, the MSBA will assign a maintenance score based on the evaluation of the existing systems and how well you've maintained your building. And then so there's an increase to your reimbursement rate based off of what their score is that's assigned to you, up to 2%. This one you'll be very interested in. There's there are incentive points from 0 to 5% for renovation of existing schools. So they're actually they want to make sure that towns are being smart and not just demoing a usable school just for the sake of doing it. So they kind of incentivize you to make sure that if you're looking at the renovation, there's some points available for you to boost your reimbursement. So we're not being wasteful. And then overlay district probably won't apply to you is another one. We don't have the math isn't all sorted out yet, obviously, as we make decisions throughout the process. We will know before town meeting what the reimbursement rate for the project will be. But again, bear in mind that there are caps. So whenever we get that reimbursement rate, the caps I just talked about will serve to reduce it. So the effective reimbursement rate will inevitably be lower than what the published reimbursement percentage is. So we want to make sure if people are asking about why we're getting, less than 53.53 or whatever the number ends up being, it's because of those caps that serve to reduce the overall reimbursement in the facilities grant.
Does anybody remember the reimbursement rate on Clyde Brown ultimately?
Oh, I can look that up, baby. Well,
it's not 53.35,
no.
53. That's for sure.
No. I'll look that up while Charlie is doing his presentation, and
Okay.
I'll get to you at the end, Jim.
Yeah, I guess the only issue I have here is that somehow I'm sure, and I don't blame people, they've seen 53.53, and somehow they get fixed on that.
Yep.
So,
Well,
on the other hand, I don't think we're designing a building to maximize the reimbursement rate. We're designing a building where we get what we need and maximize the building.
Right.
It's not the tail wagging the dog; it's the dog wagging the tail. I hope.
Yeah, it's not the priority, but it's an important part of the conversation because, for some districts, it might be a closer, battle between a new building and a renovation or an ad reno, and sometimes that incentive points may, change the direction.
Right.
It seems so far from our discussions that you definitely favor the ad reno, so it shouldn't be less of a decision-making point, but the reimbursement rate will shake out based on those decisions, not that
Right.
it's the only decision criteria.
And I think, as Michael said, the fact of the matter is you won't actually know what your effective reimbursement rate is until we're done with schematic design, which is still 9 months away. And so,
Right.
because there's no way to calculate it out until you have a final, until you really get to the project funding agreement, the PFA, which is a really critical document, because that's the document that the MSBA basically agrees this is what we will contribute. And you don't know till then. So I think that you're right. I would put away the 53.53, keep it under your hats. It's not something to advertise. It doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that meaningful. the fact of the matter also is when you go to town meeting, you're not asking for the project less reimbursement, you're asking for the entire project.
Correct.
And then,
Charlie's making a
in
good point.
fact, the MSBA then participates in that, but the voters are going to hear whatever they hear, and it's going to be a significant number. And so this stuff is all interesting, but if you get too far into the weeds, you can drive yourself crazy. And it's
Oh, yeah.
very complex, and the formulas are very complex. So,
But
Well,
I
I think
imagine
what-
this will be a FAQ, you know, at some point, so that we can at
Yeah,
least.
but
post-
I think it's also important for everybody to remember, you know, it's not that long ago that the town went through this. So
Yep.
there's some base knowledge here.
Yep.
And I also suggest that we go through, not that we're gonna just always point to Clyde Brown, but Clyde Brown project, you know, it came in high quality, on time, under budget. So we have some credibility here, I hope, with the community, that when we
Hope
tell
so.
them what we're gonna get, that we actually are delivering on that.
Agreed.
Mike,
Good point, Jim.
Mike,
Yep, go ahead, Diane.
we had a $51 million budget. MSBA gave us 20. We came in 4 million under the 51.
Right. Okay, thanks, Diane.
All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Charlie. He's gonna walk you through the design options that have been developed, and again, try to keep in the back of your mind those criteria, because we're gonna want to whittle down the list, at least not all the way, but we're gonna want to whittle down the list so Charlie doesn't have to chase too many options, probably at our next meeting. So keep those
correct me if
criteria in
I'm
the back
wrong,
of your mind.
Michael, you're not doing that matrix till we get to the next phase, right?
We're gonna start to populate it, and then but it's not finalized until the PSR, correct?
Okay, yeah. So folks, you don't have to worry too much about that matrix. We just, as Michael said, as we move forward, we do need, before we submit, which is right after the next meeting, we want to eliminate any options that people just think are not a great choice. And that's because really we don't need them all. And it's also because the MSBA kind of expects us to. It's part of the prescriptive process we've been talking about. They don't want you to leave every option on the table because they want to make sure you've thought about it. So we have to show evidence we've thought of it, thought about it, and I think we'll be able to. I think you'll see some. So I have a lot to go over. Forgive me. I mean, unfortunately, it's a lot of information. I don't expect everybody to absorb all of it tonight. There's a number of options. Hope some of you have obviously seen it because you've been talking about it, so that's helpful. But I'm going to move quickly. Forgive me, and if I move too quickly, stop me. And hopefully we can hold some of the questions till the end. That's probably the best way. But of course, please interrupt me in the middle if you want. Just in terms of the space summary update, we're not going to show you a space summary. We are working on that because of needing to get it to the MSBA for this upcoming submission. We've already mentioned, and you saw it in the chart that's the next slide, which was sort of the green, red, and yellow, sort of showed you where things were under, over, and basically on. And we know we have sort of a 20,000 square foot deficit with the building, and some of the significant places, core academic, where we actually have about the right amount of space. Unfortunately, we have too many classrooms, so we have too many small classrooms in enough square footage. So the good news is we've got the square footage. The bad news is we probably have to make a lot of those classrooms bigger. Art and music, we need more space. We're short at least a room. STEAM and technology, we're really short because there is none, and MSBA suggests 4 rooms, so we need about 5,700 square feet there. Health and physical education, we are short, most primarily because of the gym, and also the MSBA space template calls for a gym and then a smaller PE space, and that smaller PE space is typically used for, I think I may have mentioned this previously, but you know, it can be used for fitness, it can be used for dance, it can be used for weight room, it can be any number of things depending on how the school wants to program it out, but it has become sort of a flexible space. And then the CAF, because there's been conversation about it, actually looks close to the right size, but we've been having conversations with school administrators, and it sounds like there's a real feeling that that cafeteria won't really seat comfortably the middle school. And the idea is that the middle school, which is like 270 kids, I believe, should be able to sit there in one seating. So you'd have a single middle school seating and 2 high school seatings. And it may be that we need to expand that space to make that happen. And that's something we need to study architectural. But that was that chart. You've already seen it. I won't linger on it. It's a quick read, sort of like Vertex's chart, red and green and yellow. And it shows you where we're short. You see all of that red is short, but that's per room. It isn't necessarily per overall square footage. And it gives you a sense of where the building kind of stacks up. So I will not, this is our first option. This is R1. This is the straight renovation. This one we're not going to talk about. This one we have to do. We have to submit. And we probably would never recommend you pursue because it doesn't meet the MSBA space template, at which point they probably won't fund it. And it doesn't really move you forward to creating a 21st century learning environment. That's what your goal is. So it doesn't meet the project goals, but the MSBA requires it as a part of the process. And it does create kind of a baseline. So it's a baseline cost and a baseline scope. So it will get advanced to the next phase because it must be. We have also started, and you'll see this on all for anyone who hasn't looked at the package in advance. We've also started to do conceptual phasing plans. So you can see a conceptual phasing plan here of the renovation option. And one of the things that's really tough about a project like this is there's simply nowhere to put the students during construction. And that's a problem. So what we're proposing is temporary modular classrooms in the existing parking lot below the building. So you would take, for instance, the blue phase and you'd put the kiddos into trailers. And then when you finish the blue phase, you'd put students back into that renovated blue box. You'd take students out of the yellow box and put them into the temporary classrooms, and so on. And then the orange box, and this is really we have a pretty consistent phasing plan that I think will work. The orange box is really the idea of doing 3 summer phases. So you start in June and finish in August, and you do it over 3 summers. So if you started the project in June and it was 2 years in duration plus a summer, it would be about 26 months. And that would hopefully complete the project. What we will find is that it's going to drive up costs to have temporary classrooms. And again, a renovation project doesn't really move us forward in terms of educational planning. This is the first of the addition renovations. This you've already seen in conceptual level. It was the interview scheme. I won't linger on it, but it has a STEAM wing below where art and music is, which is nice because it connects all of those spaces. It has a new large sort of multi-purpose media center in the courtyard. It has new kind of entrances. And you'll see, and you can see here that our high school's in pink, our middle school is in blue, and those classroom wings now stack vertically, which means they really literally act like 2 separate schools to some degree, revolving around this central space. The phase, well, I'll talk about the phasing. The good thing is we get a really wonderful sort of multi-purpose media space. We get a really great new STEAM wing that could be used by the community. We get separate entrances. The tricky bit is multiple moves. And also we continue to have really long circulation for students. So it's what you have now, but a student, who's up here has got a long way to go if they're going down to there, right? So it's not, it's not a very compact plan, which we kind of don't see as a great option. Cafeteria and gym are not right sized for what you want. Locker rooms remain in the same location, although that may not be a real negative. And we think we may lose a little bit of parking with this one. But this, like the last one you saw, has a similar phasing strategy, except the benefit here is we don't need portable classrooms, because we take the STEAM wing and we take that new media center and we build those first. And then we start to renovate, and we do a second pink phase here, move the kids into those blue boxes temporarily. They're not permanent classrooms, but they can act as swing space. Then we finish that, move students back into that pink box, do the yellow box with kids in the blue box and the pink box, and we do the orange box over multiple summers. Part of the issue here will be figuring out precisely how we circulate between these zones during construction, particularly the yellow zone. And then in that case, I think you move through the blue box to get across the building. So that's our AR1. Our AR2 maintains the building essentially as we know it, with a few little exceptions. We're building a new steam wing right in the crook of the elbow by the courtyard, but we're not filling in the whole courtyard. And if we have the middle school on the first floor and the high school on the second floor, it allows us to do brand new high school science labs on the upper floor. So that's really the new construction there. So it's less new construction than AR1 was. But it kind of keeps the building as we as is planned. Again, we're not getting any expansion to the CAF. We're not getting any expansion to the gym. We're not getting that gym multi-purpose space, but we are getting new STEAM. We are getting new science. And we're, again, stacking the two floors. So we got the blue, well, in this case, it's a horizontal stacking, right? So middle school's on the first floor, high school's on the second floor. They can have dedicated entrances. And the phasing plan for that one is not dissimilar to the renovation you saw at the beginning without the temporary classrooms. And the reason for that, again, is because we're really not building any new, the way to not have temporary classrooms is to really build a bunch of new real estate. And that new real estate we can use as temporary swing space. But when we're building a limited amount of new real estate, it's very difficult to do. I mean, we are building this one box, but that's not going to fit the middle school, and it's not going to fit the high school. So I think we would end up in this case with some modular classrooms here. So that's the phasing for that one. Then the next one.
Quick question there.
Yes,
Charlie, I'm
of course.
sorry. Is that a big expense, those modular classrooms? I imagine they're not cheap, right? Like
No,
wasting
they're
money.
not. I mean, I think I don't know. We have to do a count on how many. We're doing an elementary school in Winchester right now, and they have, goodness, I think 14 classrooms, and I think all in, that's almost a $3 million installation.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
we're
Charlie,
talking a
am I
lot of
correct?
money.
That's not reimbursable?
That's
Temporary
not
classrooms are not at
reimbursable.
all reimbursable,
Correct.
right?
No,
Correct.
not in not only is it not reimbursable, the other, I think I may have said this at some meeting or other, the other downside of it is it's spending tax dollars on something that you don't benefit from long
Yeah,
term.
but
You're
just
paying
wasted
for-
money.
You're paying for a temporary facility that you lease, that shows up on a truck, gets installed, and gets removed after 2.5 years. So it isn't a wonderful investment, but in some communities, it's really the only way forward.
Right, and
The other
Charlie,
way,
just
of
if I
course-
could just jump in quick, but part of that, why Charlie's talking about that is for the decisions that we have to make, that's a factor, that's a minus that we have to weigh against, like a larger addition area, like the first option. So when the first option, they had more space to put people in, and we'll gain that benefit because we'll be able to keep that space, whereas this is just space that will come and go that we won't get any benefit of. So that's why they're doing the study and walking us through all this.
Right, so these are.
Don't use think of the modulars in a vacuum. There are times, and I'm not sure if it's here, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but there are times when a short-term modular rental actually saves duration, and duration means money when it comes to construction. So there are times when it's actually a cost benefit to be able to build the building faster. And speed saves money, and we can balance the two out. So I don't want to think of it just in a vacuum and just rule it out as much as possible. But I want to make sure we're thinking about the whole picture.
No, and that's a great
So-
point.
So Michael, we do have durations here, and our durations are really no different. This still continues to be a 3-summer situation,
Okay.
2-year situation, because we can't think of any way to get these wings done. I mean, you may be able to do one. So we were treating these wings as that they're basically a year. And it maybe we could do them in less and have some sort of a mid-year move. But nonetheless, unless we rethink how we do the main shared spaces, we think we really need 3 summers, which is, you know, June to August academic year, June to August academic year, June to August, which gets us to 26 months. And they're almost all planned that way. So how temporary classrooms could speed up the duration enough to offset, I'm not sure, but we'd have to look
Yeah,
at it.
like I said, I'm not sure if I haven't delved into the options enough to see if that's something here. I just mean there are other communities
Yeah,
where that does work. So
Right.
I don't want to
Yeah.
just rule it out until we've done the due diligence about, let's really evaluate
well,
the
we'll
whole
do
project as a
we'll
whole.
do, we'll do cost estimates on all of
Yep.
these with
Yep.
the durations, which go into the cost, and with the temporary classrooms that goes into the costs, and see where it all shakes out. But my intuition is you'd rather build an addition, which you get to use for 50 years,
Agreed.
than invest in temporary classrooms you have to remove offsite. This is AR3, which effectively places a new middle school, standalone middle school, at the front of the building. So it's across from the locker rooms, it's below the path. And what it does is it does what we talked about just now. It gives us a place to put students during the renovation phase. It allows us to take down a piece of the existing building ultimately and use that for pickup, drop off, and parking. And it allows us to kind of create a high school in pink and a middle school in blue, and it's easier to see it on the second floor. But if you see, you know, truly 2 schools, right? School, and then the shared stuff is all in the middle, right? So all the kids are going, you know, from one side or the other side to share spaces. So there's a lot of benefits to a diagram like this. The downside to this particular one, and I'm going to show another one in a minute, is the middle school is a little bit isolated in this scheme, right? So you've got a long way to go if you're going to go, you know, maybe to STEAM and art. You got a really long way to go if you go to music. So there are some issues around the middle school feeling kind of isolated. And it is where it's right. Its entrance would be right across from the service entrance. So there are a couple of things that aren't ideal about it, but we think we could work out kind of a pickup drop-off zone in the back for buses and enter the high school to the south and potentially the middle school to the west, and kind of move that bus loop and then make that bus loop potentially parking. So that's the concept there. It allows us to do what we've been talking about with phasing, where we can basically do the first phase and then occupy it for phases 2 and 3. And then the 4th phase, in this case, it does have a 4th phase, which might add a little bit of duration because we might not be able to get the demolition done in the summer, but the final summer and plus maybe into early fall would be taking down a wing of the building and completing site work. But that one is a different way of approaching the problem. And then the next one is sort of related to it, but a little bit different. This one moves that middle school classroom to the left And that actually does a better job of connecting it to their school, because if you go right up this circulation spine, if we created a new entrance, you could leave that way. It puts the middle school kids right adjacent to this, to the existing art rooms and music rooms. It again, just like the last scheme, creates a high school and a middle school with all the shared stuff between them, right? Which is nice. The other thing it does, which the other ones don't, is it puts a new gymnasium, brand new gym, right size gym on top of where the cafeteria is now. It creates a new cafeteria, which can be right sized to the goals of the 270 middle school students seated. And it moves service off from the absolute center of what could be the front of the building, and allows you to have a public entrance into basically where the gym is, where the cafeteria is, and where the theater is. So that becomes a really nice community building. And if you close off the building here and here, you have a community building that really encompasses your auditorium, your gym, your cafeteria. Your cafeteria can be used essentially as a lobby for events and functions in that way, which I know you use yours now already that way, but it continues to be used that way. And the other interesting feature is, by leaving the old gym, we can then take that gym and use it for something else. And what we proposed here was that it would become that PE space we talked about, that smaller PE, multi-purpose PE space. And it would also allow for the STEAM classrooms we need that we're short on, as I mentioned very early on in terms of our space summary topic. So there are a lot of interesting features about that. Now, that being said, it is more new square footage. So there may be a cost implication there that is not palatable, but it does solve some interesting aspects to the project, and really begins to solve a lot of the problems. In that case, the phasing, again, pretty similar. Blue is the first, really blue is kind of the first phase, although it would be sub phases, because the first phase would be to build really the middle school and the cafeteria, which we could do without disrupting anything. And then the cafeteria could move into the new cafeteria to allow the gym to be built probably in phase 2. But we would do the same thing. We'd use that middle school as swing space. So we would, we would move kiddos into the lower part of the classroom wing while we're doing the yellow phase, and into the blue boxes when we were doing the yellow phase. There'd probably have to be a temporary connection between here to do that, because this yellow box would be off limits. And then the rest of the core stuff would be done in 3 summers. And then the final phase again would be the removal of that pink box at the bottom. And again, that allows us to look at a lot more flexibility around site. Where do we pick up and drop off? How do we do a bus and car loop? And then public parking could be in the front for events and the like. And there would be that direct connection for students. So that's that one. And then this one is a sub version of the last one, because the last one had the gym up in the top corner and a new cafeteria. This one says, well, what if we didn't do a new caf? What if we lived with the old caf and maybe renovated the kitchen to have service on the front, so that we could still maybe enter through there and not be going right next to the service entrance, although the service entrance would still be right smack on the front of the building. The other one, the nice thing is the service is over in the corner. But put the gym so that it's directly adjacent to the locker rooms, because if you notice in the previous one, the gym was up here, a little bit of travel distance. I don't think it's a big deal, but if it's a deal breaker, this would solve that problem. But otherwise, it's treated very much the same way. That's why we ended up calling it A4A as opposed to giving it its own version, because all it is it's the same basic idea, with the exception of not doing a new cafeteria. And then these are the new ones. This is the new one that builds on top of the fields. You've seen some version of this. This actually builds it out to the full scale. And what you would do is you would build this new building on top of your fields while you kept your existing school in session. So the benefit is you don't have a lot of disruption to ongoing school operations during new construction. The disaster is you lose all your fields for many, many seasons, because not only do you lose them while you're building on top of them, you then have to tear down the old building, build the new fields, and then give them time to grow back, right? But it is a kind of tried and true strategy for new schools. We do this a lot. We put a new school on top of the fields. The team plays away games for 5 years. Or finds another field in town, and then you have your new school. So that has some pros and some cons. We know we're not going to spend a lot of time on the new ones. This one is incredibly disruptive because you're building on top of your existing school. So this one assumes you're taking every student in the middle high school and moving them somewhere else. And we're assuming they're going to some empty building somewhere that can house 600 kids. So, and you'll tell us where that is. And then the pro is you don't have to mess with your fields, but there aren't a lot of other pros here. And then the final one is Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica attempts to fit a new middle school, high school, sort of between the existing building and the football field. What's concerning about, and it's 3 stories. What's concerning about it is I do think we're really squeezing the track here. And we also will have to, you lose the locker rooms for some duration because you'd be building a new administration on top of the locker rooms, because you can't actually build the whole building with the existing school there. It just simply won't fit unless we did something like put the building in the parking lot and you figured out somewhere else to park. So those are 3 new ones. We didn't bother with phasing. The fact is they're all going to be through 3.5 plus years of construction, and some of them will be longer. The field one will most certainly be longer. But the fact is, if you have a 2-year construction on a new build, followed by 6 months of demolition, followed by 4 months of final site work, you're really talking most of 36 months. I think, when we talked at the beginning of the meeting about getting rid of options, I most certainly think we could eliminate some new options, because they just are, they're really kind of don't make a whole lot of sense. And I certainly, if you want my professional opinion, I think it would be very easy to get rid of N2, because unless you tell us you have a place for swing space, there's just no justification for it. Because if you said, well, sure, we'll bring in 600 classrooms of modulars, we're talking $1 bazillion. So that would be an easy one to get rid of. I also think you could probably pick your poison between N1 and the Battlestar. And we would be down probably to 1 new build for advancing into the next phase. So again, we're going to advance into the next phase with at least 1 reno, which we have, and at least 1 replacement, of which we right now have 3. And then as many addition renovations as we think are important to continue to study. So the MSBA isn't saying, tell us the one you've picked. It's saying, just tell us that you focused on it, and that if there are ones that you think you can jettison, you've jettisoned. And I think there may be, and now I'm going to leave that more to you guys. I'm not going to lead a horse to water on the addition renovations. I think there are probably a couple of addition renovations that may logically not make the cut for some pretty specific reasons. But that's it. I got through it in a half an hour. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And if we want to have a dialogue around it, that's great. And I can hopscotch around to different schemes if you want me to.
Charlie, I'd like to look at the renos.
Okay.
Reno ads, excuse me, not the straight reno.
So
Yeah.
this is our AR1. Oops, I went too far. There's our AR1.
Mm.
So that's the interview scheme. That's the one where we add. So this one right now doesn't add any space to PE. It doesn't add any space to CAF, but it does give you a really robust STEAM program / I mean, this really would become a community space, which is a desirable kind of feature, which we were just talking about. So I thought it was worth mentioning again. And it gives a very kind of robust, sort of large media center. But I think with this one, it really, the educators have to weigh in on whether they would deploy these kind of spaces in a kind of robust way. And it creates a new heart to the school, right? So it kind of, the school sort of rotates pinwheels around that, in that sort of central zone. I know there were concerns expressed about closing off the courtyard, so there aren't windows. There's no, you're looking, a lot of classrooms, particularly on the upper floor, are just looking into a 2-story interior space. There are certainly plenty of schools that do that have kind of atriums, but that may be a concern. And it obviously reduces the size of your existing courtyard. But it does do some nice things. As I said, it creates kind of a nice sort of multi-purpose zone for academic use, and it creates this kind of central hub. But it also falls a little bit short relative to program satisfaction. So that's that one. And that one, we think the phasing works. This was this was number 2. This is the one where we really essentially, with a little tweak, keep what you have. So this isn't too far off of a straight reno, but it does give you your STEAM classrooms that you're woefully lacking, and it does give you an opportunity for some more academic space on the second floor that logically could be science labs because they're so much bigger than standard classrooms. And as we talked about, the challenge there is that we don't quite know, and we can continue to scratch our heads, we don't quite know how to build this thing, much like the straight renovation. We don't know how to build this thing without at least some temporary classrooms, because we're just not building enough new acreage of construction to get all the kids out of the renovation. And it gets wildly inefficient if you say, oh, well, let's renovate 3 classrooms at a time or something. Then the contractors are just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You need to give them enough sort of area that they can actually be productive and I think, and produce work. The exact duration of some of these phases obviously is up to discussion and further analysis, but so that's the challenge with that one. This one, kind of an interesting approach in that it does add this separate middle school, which we've heard a lot about the desire kind of to create school identities. So a middle school, which has an identity, a high school that has an identity, and all the shared spaces in between, which is a really kind of the traditional way you treat a middle high school. Certainly treat a middle high school if you were starting from scratch. You'd say, here's the middle school, here's the high school, here's all the shared stuff in the middle. What is unique to one? What is unique to the other? What can they share? And every middle high school we've done is shared gym, auditorium, cafeteria, usually art and music. So those are the things they share as STEAM. But then they have their own academic wings, and then administration. We've done both ways. We've had schools with shared administration. We have schools with completely separate administration. I think the early thinking here is we want separate administrations, and we may retain a middle school admin, a high school admin, and a district admin. So we may very well have 3 different admins, which is actually not bad, because unlike a new school where we have a focused spot for a front door, the site is very difficult, and you're going to have multiple entries, and it's nice to have entries that are controlled and supervised. So the more administrations we have, it may be the better. Sometimes from a staffing point of view, districts say, you know what, we can really share staff. And so we're going to just have a single administration, but it doesn't matter to us, and it might be a benefit. So that's this one.
Charlie, before you move on, just one thing. So we need like 20,000 square feet. On this one, it's 45. So we'd be roughly 25 over what we need.
No, but we're tearing down a whole wing.
Okay, so So then we're additions 45, so gross will end up at 140.
Total gross is 140 here.
Okay.
And that's where we need to be, isn't it?
I think so. I actually don't know.
No, that's
Makes
about
sense.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they all do have a total gross on them. So this one is 141, which is 2. And oops, and 1 is 144. So it's a little oversized. But it's not,
Does
you
it
know,
really
a lot
cost
of-
you?
Hmm?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It costs less to build new than to renovate typically, right?
No.
They tend to be frighteningly similar.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, because I was just
People are
thinking we
always-
gotta build.
No, but Jim, on that sounds good. Remember the site work and everything, that wouldn't be covered by the MSBA. So that's something. we have to
No, but
look
I was just thinking, we're gonna build an extra 20,000 to get, we're gonna build 40,000 new, which is 20,000 more than in theory we need, but yeah, we're ripping something down, but we still have to build it, right? So
Yeah.
that's why I was asking that sort of
So we'll
math
do,
question of.
yeah, we'll do the analysis, but pretty consistently over many years when we've looked at these projects, the renovation is never significantly less, because the fact of the matter is, if you're redoing the envelope, if you're redoing the systems, if you're redoing the fenestration in the windows, if you're bringing it into compliance with code, if you're doing new finishes, the only thing you're really saving is foundations and structure, if you can, and some of the closure. So it isn't a huge delta, but it may be a delta. We don't know. We haven't had the cost estimators haven't looked at it yet. So
I'm surprised it's even close. I would have thought it'd been really significantly more than building new, but
yeah, they tend to be
That's fine.
close. They tend to be
Yeah.
close. And I don't know. What we've just always found that in the end, it isn't usually the driver decision, but it could be. I don't know if it could be here. But it's a lot easier to build new. Just even an addition, obviously, is easier than renovation from a constructability point of view. And then this one was the one that's kind of like the last one, but this has the big addition. So it's right sized. It's 40 square feet, but the addition is significant, right? So it's 62,000 and it's 82,000 in reno. So we don't end up with a really oversized building. It's slightly bigger. But we do end up with a lot more new construction. So, we're gonna have to see what that does to our cost analysis. But it does do a lot of great things for us in terms of really solving pretty much every problem, I think. And it does do that same thing where you have the diagram with the separate blue boxes and the separate pink boxes, and they're on either side of all this shared stuff. So,
Charlie, can I ask a question on this one?
yeah.
So the existing gym, I think you talked about putting potentially like steam and then a lighter, smaller like PE space.
Yes.
Is there any other academic additions in this one?
This one essentially gets new steam, and then we just rework the floors to grab. We need one more art classroom, right? It may be that art classroom ends up in the blue box.
Okay.
The hope is that this would cover the steam need. I think these are oversized. These boxes are a little bit oversized for the academic. So particularly with middle school. We need 4 or 5 classrooms per grade. And if we just stack 2 floor plates on probably the first floor, but one of the 2 floors are going to have too many classrooms, right? Because we have 1 grade on one floor and 2 grades on the other floor. So we should be able to augment what's on one floor with the other stuff we need. And that, for instance, and we may be displacing things too, like, but for instance, on the last option, if we're essentially building on top of district administration, we may say, well, let's put district administration right in the, first floor of the middle school. and it'll have its own separate entrance, and could have an entrance from the outside, but it's a way of you deploying that space efficiently. So I think that the check for us right now isn't literally counting rooms as it is looking at overall square footage in general. This could take us a while to get to getting accounting, being able to track down every room. We're not there
Yeah.
yet. We're
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to sort of get to a place where we have the right sized blocks and make sure we think it fits on the site, and sort of figure out what we think is new and what we think is renovation.
Yeah, yeah. Because I saw like some of the earlier ones had like science rooms or like science labs. So I know like this one has wonderful additions for gym, calf.
Right.
Um,
But
but
it does, I think it'll have enough academic space. We just need to vet that.
sure, okay, thanks.
But if we have the right square footage, then we should have the right amount of classrooms. So that's that one. And then this one was just this version of the other one, except for without a new cafeteria. And I think obviously the the good part of it is that we do less new construction. The bad side of it bad part of it might be the cafeteria is slightly constrained. And then the other third issue, of course, is that if we wanted a community entrance here, we'd have to completely rework the kitchen, and we'd be ending up putting service on the front of the building, which is not particularly attractive. So, there's some complexities there, but it would give us the opportunity to just do a gym and not worry about the calf. So it's a menu, right? It's looking at
Charlie?
different choices. Yeah.
Neither one of those options would require temporary modulars.
Neither. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only ones that have modulars are really the ones that we're not building much new, because we're using the strategy that, hey, we're going to build a bunch of new and move kids into it, and they become our modulars. They
Yeah,
become our
okay.
swing space. So the ones where it doesn't really work out are the ones where we're not doing much new. So that means AR2 is a little bit too tight, I believe. We're not building enough. We build four science classrooms and 3 or 4 STEM rooms. Maybe we could get like the middle school in there. We're never going to get the high school in there. We might be able to pull it off with only a few modulars. And then AR1, I think there's, excuse me, not AR1, AR2. AR2, yeah, AR2 is the one only ad reno that we seem to think we are going to need some mods to make it work.
Charlie, can I ask you a question about the renovation component?
Yes.
When you say renovation, I don't mean the first one where we're just putting in new wiring. I mean, really renovating. I mean, does that mean you're gutting the floor and rebuilding it to be the right size?
Yes.
So help me, because this is where I'm starting to get a little bit confused. And maybe others on the committee can correct me. I think that there may be a feeling in the community that a renovation project, I mean, a really genuine renovation project to make this whole, like what it should be, is a lot cheaper than building new. And what I'm hearing you say, that's just not the case.
I think that the new options will all be more than the renovation edition options.
I don't mean, I'm sorry, not the brand new school,
Oh,
but a school.
new construction on new additions versus renovations on the same building. It is perfectly possible that they will be similar price points. We just don't know yet.
We don't know, but it's not going to be half.
No,
to renovate
it's not
the
going to
room.
be 50 cents to the dollar. No.
Yeah, okay.
Not even close.
No.
Well, I guess maybe, I don't know if others agree that that's what some people think is going to happen, but
Yes, we get that all the time. Like
Right.
if it's just, significantly cheaper just to build a renovation project, and that's just not the case.
No, I mean, if you go back to the Clyde Brown and look at the early budget numbers there, it would bear it out, bear out this analysis. So, you look at that diagram and you just squint your eyes and you think that's a lot of red. And you know,
Right.
they don't go green until we move all those walls. So
Right.
that means we're going to be moving a lot of walls.
And the
It
thing
doesn't
too-
mean we can't use the floor plate. It just means we're moving a lot of walls to make it all work.
Right, and that's why we're doing this whole thing, is that, you know, our goal is to try to be as effective as possible, and to do that, we have to walk through the process, so.
So I think we'll know more when we see some budget numbers, but I will warn, I really, the MSBA right now is so we can't possibly develop accurate costing at this stage. We have little diagrams here. The cost estimators are going to take those little diagrams and they're going to say historically what we know about the marketplace right now, and we have an excellent estimator. What we know about the marketplace is this kind of work is probably running about this, and they're going to kind of apply that to the square footage. They are not doing a formal full-blown estimate. They can't. So the whole thing is going to be kind of just, and they're going to put huge contingencies on everything, and they're going to have a lot of hedges. And so I would caution against too much faith in the early numbers. I mean, I have a lot of faith in what PM&C does because they're excellent people, but you know, they're not real. They're not real estimates. They're not going to be truly real estimates till we get to schematic design, which is when you make your commitment to the MSBA in terms of what you're doing. But I think by the time we get to the end of the PSR, which is the preferred schematic report, and you all pick an option, we will have a much better idea of numbers. But I think for comparative purposes, it's a really useful exercise to take all these little diagrams and say, well, this is probably in the range. And generally, I don't know if Michael agrees with this on this one, but we generally present them as ranges. We say option 2 is X to X, and we give it a whatever.
At this phase, I don't have an issue with that, because it's just purely conceptual. And we haven't drilled down yet into details to really be able to define. So you have to give yourself a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah. And what you kind of want to do is say, well, this one is $1 sign, this one's $2 signs, this one's $3 signs. In other words, it's more, well, that's the most expensive one, that's the less expensive one. That's interesting data. But, you know, you don't want to say, well, how come this one is, you know, $9 more than the last one? You're not doing that. So
I don't see any that are single dollar signs here.
there are no single dollar signs. There are no school construction projects in Massachusetts with single dollar signs.
Rich?
Go ahead, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if it's appropriate, because I think that maybe this helps us get somewhere, for the educators to maybe tell us a little bit about why they might favor a plan that really separates the middle school and the high school, that creates like this AR3. Is this really something that we should pursue, or is it not as critical? Because some of the other ones, you know, continue to overlap, where I know there's middle school and high school kids on the same floor.
That's a good question. Well, Diane or Mark?
I would say, just, you know, speaking for myself, a high school and a middle school, they're two different philosophies. And the middle school setup is they're set up in teams, grade level teams, with a team of teachers. You know, the same teachers teach the 6th grade, a group of teachers teach the 7th grade. It's a unique setup. High school is set up by departments. And so I think the building of those separate wings can lend themselves to each of the different setups. Also, you know, we do have, right now we have middle school and high school kids on the same floor. I don't want to speak for Anna and Mark, but it's not ideal. We don't have a lot of problems that happen between the high school and the middle school, but the potential is there. And I think separating helps there as well. I also think it gives each school a distinct culture and character. You know, right now, sometimes when people come in the school, they enter, or until Anna's done some nice work getting a separate entrance to the middle school over by the bus loading. But prior to that, you know, people would come in and they didn't know where the middle school was. It wasn't a sense of its own school. And I think that's important for the staff and the students to feel like they're their own unique school with their own unique philosophy, their own unique setup, and a building design that works for the way teaching and learning is done at that level. I don't know if Anna and Mark.
Yeah, I can't see if they're there. I can't see, I have my screen too small to see that.
Yeah, I think Bob said it very well, but we have kids that are 11 years old and kids that are 17, 18 years old, and it can be very intimidating to some of those sixth graders to be around the high school kiddos. And the teaming model is so important, so that we have these little schools within the school, so they have their little learning communities where everything is kind of close together, and they have like a little pod of people that know them well and can kind of shepherd them from that transition from fifth grade where they're with the same teacher all day to now rotating, 6 different blocks in a day. So, just that middle school kind of care, but the transition from elementary is really critical. Would be my 2 cents about how to keep them separate.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
mean, I think
Sorry.
you both, oh, sorry, Rich. I was just gonna say, I think you both kind of nailed it on the head. I think there are certainly some developmental differences between the grades, and I think you mentioned that, Anna, you have 11-year-old kids in the building and you have 18-year-old kids in the building. And like Bob said, I said, we're very fortunate that we don't have a lot of a lot of challenges with that, but that it always sets itself for that possibility because we have so many shared hallways and spaces and whatnot. It would be nice to be able to kind of separate things out where our shared spaces truly were the places where the kids mingled. Yet we also still have the opportunities in our buildings to be able to collaborate on different things, because we do have an opportunity to do at times, some peer mentoring and things like that with the middle school. That is great because that is unique to our district. We have 3 schools within a pretty close radius, and it's very easy for us to be able to have our students interact in different ways with kids in the different buildings. But I think, our rules in the buildings are different. Our cultures are different in each school. And so, I think we've, over the years, and again, having been here for, I think my 17th year now, you could see that need has always kind of been there, and having the opportunity to potentially be able to do that, I think would be incredibly impactful for both schools and for the students and families in the town. So that would be my 2 cents too, but I think you both kind of nailed it.
All right, great. No, thank you. So I think with that, Charlie, I think we've gone through the models that you'd put up. We need to think about it as a group, because we're going to have to come back and try to limit these down to a fewer number of models. And we all got some good things to think about. So Mike, was there anything else that we had to continue on?
Yeah, so that's a good circle back, Rich. So our next meeting is March 27th. So that's gives you 3 weeks. Throughout that, feel free to bounce questions off of me. If we need to loop in Charlie and Chris, we can do that as well. But funnel everything through me and I'll distribute as needed if questions arise. But again, keeping the criteria in the back of your mind as you evaluate these options, thinking about all those criteria will be helpful in order to start to whittle it down. I did want to get back. Charlie, you had something to say, Charlie?
I just wanted to say the 27th is when we have to whittle it down, right? Because we're asking you on the 27th not only for the final options that you want to advance, we will show them all. So we have to work on them all. So this isn't about us doing any less work, because we're going to work on them all. We're going to present them all to the MSBA. They'll see them all. But they do ask for a statement that says, well, which ones are you moving forward with? Right. So we do the work.
And just to be clear, there's multiple, like, it doesn't, we don't need to whittle it down to 2 or 3, like, if
No.
there's some that are really valid, we want to keep them on the table.
Yep. We don't want to
as
get
we-
rid of them, then they'll be mad too. What we want is a nice sweet spot in the middle.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we're going to be asking you for an endorsement that night of the submission. So
Right.
don't panic. It isn't too scary because it really is the preliminary submission. And as we've been talking about for a few months here, an awful lot of it, besides these preliminary diagrams, is really about existing conditions findings. So it's
Right.
the one thing that the MSBA really, really, really cares about is the district's ed plan. That's
plan.
the sort of the great sort of touchstone for this first phase, the thing the MSBA is most focused on. And that has to be really done. But beyond that, but we're going to say to you, you need to vote to allow us to submit, right, Mike?
And that also, the ed plan will need to go through the school committee, which I think is the night before.
Right.
Is they need to vote to sort of proceed with that ed plan. And Bob is working on that. We did get him some feedback from David Stephen, who's worked on, hundreds of them. We'll be bouncing that back and forth for a little bit, and that'll get submitted to the school committee for approval. And then the next night we will be looking for you to approve the submission for the PDP. To Charlie's point, don't feel like you're going to get backed into a corner too much at this stage. It's not quite like that. It's really the next stage where, we'll really need to make the final decisions about what your preferred option is.
No, we just want to make some sensible decisions. As I said earlier, I think there's a couple of really obvious candidates that we could take off the table.
Yep.
And also rest assured that when we come back to you in 3 weeks, we're coming back with conceptual site plans. So you can see the beginnings of ideas around parking and pickup and drop off, which may inform your thinking a little bit. And we will also be coming back, of course, with these budget numbers, which may also inform your thinking. But again, we're not trying to get to 1. We're not trying to get to final. So it's going to be okay. There's not too much pressure on it.
And then lastly, I did promise I'd get back to Jim regarding Clyde Brown. So at the time, Clyde Brown's reimbursement rate was 57%. That included, some incentives, et cetera. But the effective reimbursement rate ended up being about 42%, 42.5%. When all is said and done, that's because of the caps and those other things that I mentioned. So,
Well, we weren't going to have the MSBA pay for pickleball courts either, right?
you could try.
Oh, we've already been down this trail.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that just gives you a sense of sometimes once you hit those caps, that effective reimbursement rate could be a good chunk lower than the published version, so to speak.
Sure. Rich?
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Would it be of any value at our next work group meeting, if we tried to come up with our top 2 Reno ad choices?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that it would hurt getting some feedback. Like
Yeah.
Charlie said, the closer we can work on getting nailed down, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So we have a work group in 2 weeks, Mike?
Let me see the next one on the schedule.
20th?
I believe so, yes. Yep. So
Okay.
we've been trying to follow that same pattern of, meeting twice a month with the working group, including the week before the SBC, so we can get prepared for these SBC meetings. Yes, the 20th is next working group meeting.
Good, okay.
And then the 21st is the next, there's one tomorrow and then another Ed Visioning on the 21st as well, in terms of upcoming activities.
So
All right.
That's all I had, Rich, on my.
Good.
So that's great. Thank you, Mike. Kim, I saw the next thing on our agenda is vote to approve SBC invoices. I don't remember seeing any.
No, I just put it in there in case any showed up. So we don't have.
Wasn't there one? Didn't you send one out, Kim?
I did, but that was for PBC, so we'll do
Yeah.
that after you guys
Oh,
leave.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, thank you though.
Yeah, so in terms of this project, our invoice package will be on the 27th agenda.
Right, and on that one, Mike, you're gonna get that out to us ahead of time like they
Yep.
used to do. Because,
Yep.
you know, last time we got it the day of and it didn't give
Yep.
us a chance to look at it.
And that'll be basically our invoice and Tape's invoice for the month of February.
Okay, when why don't I let, so we have, well, you and Charlie can take off because we don't need you to vote on the meeting minutes. I thank you both for your time.
Thank
And-
you.
Appreciate it. Have a good
Have a
evening,
good
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next order on on the agenda would be vote to approve the SBC meeting minutes. So I make a motion that we approve the minutes of February 13th, 2024, as written. I'm gonna do the count by roll call.
Yeah, second,
So, okay,
Second.
motion's made and seconded. Let's see, Diane,
yes, aye.
Jim,
Yes,
John,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Oh, and Denise, sorry.
Aye.
All right, so the motion passed unanimously. All right, I think unless there's anything else, I think I make a motion to, we'll close the SBC meeting, which, all the school folks can go. I know you're sad to go, but, we thank you and we'll see you, shortly.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
thank you.
Night.
Thank you, thank you.
Bye. Have a good night.
All right, so the next turning on to the permanent building committee business, Diane's gonna give us an update on the Lansing Millis building project. Diane did a bunch of work to help out and got a bunch of information together and did a submission. So if you want to walk us through that, Diane, that'd be great.
Yep, I sent a one-page summary of what we've been doing, trying to get bids and all that other wonderful stuff. And I had two statements of condition, one on the building and one on the masonry. And we had a bid for the roof and a bid for the masonry, which was maybe a little incomplete. So I sent that, oh wait, I forgot. We also had a bid for lighting, exterior lighting. We were going to put an exterior light on the back pole on the north side where there is one, but a better one and one in the front. And we got a quote for that from the electrician. I sent all of that off to the town administrator, who forwarded it to the Department of Administration and Finance, who have said they will make a decision on whether the money will go as directed from a year and a half ago, I guess. And they'll have that sometime mid-March. I've also asked the architect, Lynn Spencer, who did the first study, the very long one, very comprehensive. I asked if she could come up with a price to do a full statement of condition, which will enable us to get a building permit. We need to do that. If we get the money, then we can fund that, and then we can get a building permit and get to work. Okay?
Yep. And so with that, we're going to be limited this because of the new building rules. We're going to be limited in the amount of work that we can do to the building. And what happens is if we do more than $100,000 or percentage of the cost of the building, assessed cost of the building, that triggers an energy upgrade, which means that we would have to bring the whole building up to the latest energy codes. That's how the new building code works. So we have to be careful of how we go ahead and do that. We reached out to Mike Giampetro, who helped us out on that. And so we have to be really careful on this. So this may be something where we do a portion of it. And then Diane, you said there was a 3-year moratorium on when we could go back. So we basically could do it. We'd have to sit for 3 years.
I think you said 5.
Well, I said 5. I thought you said 3.
No, 5.
Is it 5? Then we'd have
Yep.
to wait 5 years before we did the other portion of it. because of, that's the way the code is. We can't afford to upgrade the whole building to meet
No.
the energy code. So this may be something where we take care of the roof, we do the foundation repair work, we'll get to a cap of what we can spend, and we stop. We have the money, so that can sit in an account, and that way we can plan to go for our next phase of whatever renovation we're doing.
And the 100,000 will get us a pretty comprehensive envelope
Yeah,
of the building.
it'll
it
get the
should-
roof, it'll get the foundation.
And
What were the costs you submitted? What were they?
the roof was 55. The lighting was about 2,500, I think, and the mason was incomplete.
I thought Jim McKay said he could help us with the lighting. Is that not the case?
That's where we get the quote from.
That is the case. Yep.
How about gutters on the building?
We didn't get a number for that, but we can get that. Yeah, we did. I asked the same company that bid, so we asked them, we had to get them to change it over from who it was originally proposal went to the town of Millis. That took 6 months to happen. And then I asked them for a price for fascia, gutters, and downspouts 3 times. They didn't get back to us on that. So that's where we're at with that group. So.
Rich, just from my point of view anyways, I think the gutters and fascia are more important than the foundation work. Because that water just constantly coming off the roof is causing the problem.
Yep, no, and I don't disagree. I'd say let's see where we come in with the money, and let's see. I'm hoping that if it works out well,
Yeah.
we have enough to do both.
Yeah.
So-
John, the mason had also suggested a 5-foot apron around the whole building.
Right, but my mason didn't suggest that, and
Oh, he didn't?
said no, did not at all. So that would be something where, we get that number, but we didn't necessarily take it out. It would probably
What
make
do
more
you mean an
sense.
apron, like waterproofing it?
No, he was talking about basically pouring a sidewalk around it to shed the water away from the foundation. But
Oh,
at your point, if we took the downspouts and gutters and got the water away, that
Yeah.
would be more cost effective, and it wouldn't be,
Who
there's a bunch of,
who was the mason? Was that Donnie Parker?
yeah. So, all right, and thank you, Diane, for that. So that's underway. When we hear
I
back.
got a
from-
quick question there, guys.
Yep,
So
go
what
ahead.
are our hard numbers? That's our cap to spend. It was either some percentage of an assessment of the building, and I don't know what the building's.
100,000.
100,000.
Yes, 100,000.
It's 100,000. All right, thanks.
And so anyhow, that takes care of that. And thank you for doing all that, Diane. Was glad to get that put in. The next thing we have on the agenda is a DPW project invoice. So the DPW installed the generator, which we approved a couple of years ago, which we had to wait for it to come in. It's been installed and tied in. I think there was 1 or 2 smaller bills that will be coming forwards to complete that. But right now they're looking for the amount of $55,978 to Gemini Electric. So I make a motion to pay the amount of $55,978 for a bill from Gemini Electric for generator work at the DPW building.
Second.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. I'll do a roll call vote. So Diane,
Hi.
Jim,
Aye.
John,
Yes.
and I say aye. And so the motion's passed unanimously. All right. I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes for our previous meeting of February 13th as written.
Second.
All right, motion's made and seconded. All in favor, Diane,
Hi.
John,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. So great, thank you. All right, and beyond that, unless anyone else has anything, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, good. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Thanks
you.
again.
Night now.
Good
Hey,
night.
guys.